The first rays of dawn pierced through the rolling clouds of Arion, illuminating the floating meadows that hovered like emerald islands in a sea of white. Lyra Velt stood at the edge of Windrift, the easternmost sky village, her slender figure silhouetted against the golden light. The wind caressed her face, carrying whispers of change and unrest. She adjusted the leather straps of her glider harness, weathered hands moving with practiced precision. At 25, Lyra was the last true Skywalker, the final keeper of a dying art. The ancient guild that once commanded the respect of all, Arion had dwindled to a single practitioner. Now, she spent her days repairing gliders for merchants and messengers who traversed the increasingly unstable skies. "Another patch job?" called a familiar voice. Kale Wren approached with his signature lopsided grin, his messenger uniform crisp despite the early hour. His own glider, a sleek model with reinforced wings, was strapped to his back. "The stabilizer needed realignment," Lyra replied, handing him the repaired craft. "The air currents near the amber spires have been unpredictable lately." Kale's smile faded. "It's getting worse, isn't it? The celestial canopy is thinning." Lyra nodded grimly. The celestial canopy, the uppermost layer of golden clouds that had protected Arion for generations, was deteriorating at an alarming rate. Scientists predicted collapse within months, threatening the delicate atmospheric balance that kept their sky islands afloat. "The Tech Guild's solution is to build more mechanical stabilizers," Kale continued, disgust evident in his voice. "As if pumping more chemicals into the air will solve anything." The Tech Guild had risen to prominence in recent decades, replacing traditional sky navigation with automated systems and weather control technology. Their influence spread like vines across the once free sky territories, choking the ancient ways with promises of efficiency and progress. "They're hosting another demonstration today in Central Plaza," Kale added. "Thane Ormus himself will present their revolutionary atmospheric stabilizers." Lyra's jaw tightened at the mention of Thane Ormus, the guild's charismatic leader, whose vision of a controlled, commodified sky threatened everything the Skywalkers had stood for. "I have work to do," she said, turning back to her workshop, a modest structure perched on Windrift's edge. Walls adorned with diagrams of wind patterns and glider designs passed down through generations of Skywalkers. As Kale departed on his delivery route, Lyra immersed herself in the familiar rhythm of repair work. Hours passed as she mended tears in wing fabric and adjusted tension wires with meticulous care. When she finally straightened her back, the sun had begun its descent toward the horizon. A distant rumble broke the silence. Lyra stepped outside to see dark storm clouds gathering at the periphery of Windrift, their churning mass unnaturally rapid in formation. Citizens hurried to secure their homes, casting worried glances skyward. "This isn't a natural storm," muttered Orion Sky, emerging from his dwelling across the path. Once a legendary Skywalker, Orion had retired years ago after a catastrophic flight through the charcoal clouds, a treacherous region that had claimed many lives. His weathered face, lined with the stories of countless aerial journeys, now rarely left the confines of Windrift. "Tech Guild?" Lyra asked, though she already knew the answer. Orion nodded, his eyes reflecting the approaching darkness. "Weather manipulation experiments. They're pushing the boundaries again." A sudden gust slammed into the village, ripping a merchant's canopy from its moorings. Lyra sprinted forward, catching the fabric before it sailed into the abyss below. As she secured it, her foot dislodged a loose stone, sending it tumbling over the edge. Instead of falling into the endless depths as expected, the stone hesitated in its descent, caught in an unusual air current that swept it upward into the storm. "That's not right," Orion murmured, moving to stand beside her. "The air shouldn't flow that way." The sky darkened as the unnatural storm intensified. Villagers retreated indoors as rain began to fall, thick, heavy drops that seemed to carry a metallic scent. Lyra extended her hand, capturing the strange precipitation. The liquid shimmered with an iridescent quality that ordinary rain never possessed. "Chemical compounds," she said, rubbing the substance between her fingers. "They're seeding the clouds again." A flash of lightning illuminated the turbulent sky, followed by a deafening crack that shook the very foundation of Windrift. Lyra stumbled, regaining her balance just as a second. More powerful tremor rippled through the floating island. "The anchoring system!" Orion shouted over the howling wind. "The storm's affecting the levitation crystals." Panic spread through Windrift as the island lurched sickeningly to one side. Lyra rushed toward the anchor station at the center of the village, dodging falling debris. The station's control panel flickered with warning lights as the technician frantically adjusted settings. "The stabilizers can't compensate," the technician cried. "We're losing buoyancy." Lyra pushed him aside, her hands flying across the controls with instinctive knowledge. "Reroute power from the southern quadrant," she commanded, "and release the emergency ballast." The island shuddered, then gradually righted itself as Lyra's adjustments took effect. The storm continued to rage, but Windrift held steady, its ancient levitation crystals humming with renewed energy. As the immediate crisis subsided, Lyra returned to her workshop, soaked and exhausted. Something had changed in the atmosphere, something beyond the Tech Guild's usual manipulations. The celestial canopy's deterioration was accelerating, threatening the very existence of their skybound civilization. She lit a lantern and unfurled an old map of Arian's atmospheric layers, searching for answers among the faded ink lines. Her ancestors had navigated these skies using nothing but the wind's whispers and their intimate knowledge of air currents. Somewhere in their legacy must lie a solution to the growing chaos. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. Orion stood in the doorway, his tall frame stooped with age and burden. "You saved us today," he said simply. Lyra shook her head. "A temporary fix. The next storm might be worse." "You have more of your father in you than you realize." Orion entered, his eyes drawn to the map spread across the workbench. Ren Velt was the finest Skywalker I ever flew with. The mention of her father sent a familiar ache through Lyra's chest. Ren Velt had disappeared during an expedition to chart the mysterious Cloud Mountain, a legendary formation said to exist at Arian's uppermost reaches. His loss had prompted the final decline of the Skywalker Guild, as fear overtook the courage that had defined their calling. "I found something during the storm," Orion continued, producing a small object wrapped in weathered leather. It was embedded in the anchor station's foundation, exposed when the tremors shifted the stones. He unwrapped the package to reveal a fragment of crystalline material, no larger than Lyra's palm. Intricate patterns were etched into its surface, forming what appeared to be part of a larger map. "Is that?" Lyra breathed, reaching for the artifact. "A piece of the celestial map," Orion confirmed. "The ancient chart that supposedly leads to Cloud Mountain." Lyra's fingers traced the delicate etchings, heart pounding. The celestial map was considered a myth by most, a fairy tale told to aspiring Skywalkers. Yet here was tangible evidence of its existence. "My father was searching for this," she whispered. "As was I. Once," Orion admitted. "Your father and I. We believed Cloud Mountain held the key to Arian's atmospheric balance, a power source that maintained the harmony of our skies since ancient times. And now that balance is failing," Lyra concluded, the realization dawning. "The celestial canopy is collapsing because something has happened to Cloud Mountain." A thunderous explosion shattered the night, sending tremors through Windrift once more. Lyra rushed outside to see a column of smoke rising from Central Plaza, the heart of the village where most communal gatherings took place. "Tech Guild forces!" someone shouted, as armored figures descended on mechanical gliders, their engines spewing black exhaust into the already troubled air. "They're searching for something," Orion muttered, clutching the map fragment protectively. A sleek vessel hovered above the chaos, its polished surface reflecting the fires below. Upon its side gleamed the emblem of the Tech Guild, a stylized gear encircling a cloud. A figure stood at the helm, his imposing silhouette unmistakable even from a distance. "Thane Ormus," Lyra growled. The guild forces methodically searched building after building, their movements precise and coordinated. Citizens who resisted were subdued with stun batons that crackled with electrical energy. "They must have detected the map fragment's energy signature during the storm," Orion said. "We need to leave, now." "And go where?" Lyra demanded. "To find the rest of the map. To Cloud Mountain." Orion's eyes burned with a determination Lyra hadn't seen in years. "It's our only hope of saving Arian." Lyra hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'll need my father's glider." While Orion gathered supplies, Lyra uncovered the glider she had preserved but never used, Renvelt's masterpiece, designed for the treacherous journey to Cloud Mountain. Its wingspan was greater than standard models, with reinforced struts capable of withstanding extreme wind conditions. She ran her hands along the frame, feeling the legacy it carried. They slipped away through Windrift's maintenance tunnels as guild forces closed in on the workshop. Emerging on a lower platform used for agricultural purposes, they prepared for departure. "We can't do this alone," Lyra said, securing the last of their provisions. "We need someone who understands the changing atmosphere. A meteorologist." "Mira Solis," Orion suggested. "She works at the observatory in Cirrus Haven. If anyone can interpret the map and navigate the current atmospheric disturbances, it's her." "Cirrus Haven is 2 days' flight from here," Lyra noted, calculating the risks. "Through increasingly unstable airspaces. We'll need Kale too," Orion added. "His messenger routes give him knowledge of the safest current passages." As if summoned by his name, Kale's distinctive glider appeared from the swirling clouds below, ascending rapidly toward their position. He landed with practiced ease, his expression grim. "The Tech Guild is tearing Windrift apart," he reported. "They're claiming the storm was caused by rogue atmospheric manipulators, blaming the last Skywalkers for their own disaster. They're after this." Orion showed him the map fragment. "And we're going to find the rest before they do." Kale's eyes widened, then narrowed with resolve. "Where do we start?" "Cirrus Haven," Lyra answered, securing her father's glider. "We need Mira Solis." "The meteorologist?" "Good call." Kale nodded appreciatively. "But the direct route passes through Guild airspace." "Then we go through the charcoal clouds," Lyra decided, ignoring Orion's sharp intake of breath. "It's the last place they'll look for us." The charcoal clouds, a perpetually dark region where visibility dropped to near zero and volatile air currents could tear a glider to shreds, had claimed countless lives, including, many believed, Renvelt himself. "That's suicide," Kale protested, though his eyes betrayed excitement at the prospect. "Not with a Skywalker leading the way," Lyra countered, meeting Orion's troubled gaze. "2 Skywalkers." Orion closed his eyes briefly, old fears visibly wrestling with necessity. When he opened them again, determination had won. "I'll fly again," he agreed quietly. For Arian. They launched at first light, their gliders catching the thermal updrafts that flowed around Windrift's edges. Lyra felt the familiar exhilaration of true flight, not the controlled, engine-powered movement of Guild vessels, but the pure communion with air currents that defined a Skywalker. Her father's glider responded to her slightest adjustment, its design superior to any she had previously flown. As they gained altitude, the full extent of Arian's beauty spread before them, floating islands of varying sizes, connected by bridges of mist, terraced sky gardens cascading with vibrant flora, and the distant silhouettes of larger city islands, hovering like dreams in the golden light. Above it all, the celestial canopy stretched like a thinning veil, its once impenetrable golden haze now patchy and dim in places. Through these gaps, the true sky beyond was visible, a vast emptiness that both terrified and fascinated Arian's inhabitants. "The canopy's deterioration is worse than I thought." Orion called from his position to Lyra's right, his older glider steady, but less responsive than hers. "We have days, not months, before catastrophic failure." Kale, flying point position with his messenger's instinct for air currents, signaled for a course adjustment. "Guild patrol at 3 o'clock, descending to cloud cover." They dipped beneath a thick layer of cumulus, the sudden moisture beading on their goggles and wing surfaces. The patrol passed overhead, the mechanical drone of their engines fading gradually into the distance. By midday, they approached the outer boundary of the charcoal clouds, a towering wall of darkness that loomed like a bruise against the otherwise serene sky. Even from a distance, Lyra could see the chaotic patterns within the formation, swirling eddies and sudden updrafts that would challenge even the most skilled navigator. "Last chance to reconsider," Kale shouted over the increasing wind. Lyra glanced back toward the route they had traveled, noting a squadron of guild vessels emerging from the distant haze. "No choice now," she replied, adjusting her goggles. "Follow my lead, maintain distance, and if you lose sight of me, follow the wind markers." She produced small vials of luminescent liquid, an old Skywalker technique for navigation in low visibility. When released, the liquid would create brief patterns in the air, visible only to those who knew what to look for. With a deep breath, Lyra banked her glider toward the imposing darkness, feeling the air change as they crossed the threshold into the charcoal clouds. Instantly, visibility dropped to mere feet, and the smooth air currents gave way to chaotic turbulence that buffeted her craft from all sides. Instinct and training took over as she navigated by feel, sensing rather than seeing the flow of air around her wings. Periodically, she released droplets of the marker liquid, creating phosphorescent trails for her companions to follow. Time lost meaning in the disorienting darkness. Minutes stretched into hours as they penetrated deeper into the region that had claimed so many lives. Twice, Lyra narrowly avoided collision with floating debris, remnants of vessels that hadn't survived the journey. A sudden violent updraft separated the group, lifting Lyra hundreds of feet in seconds. She fought to stabilize her glider, wings straining against the unnatural force. As she crested the current, a massive shape loomed in the darkness ahead, a behemoth creature with translucent wings that spanned at least 50 feet. The sky leviathan drifted peacefully, seemingly undisturbed by the turbulence that challenged human navigators. Its bioluminescent organs pulsed gently, providing the first real light Lyra had seen since entering the charcoal clouds. "Magnificent," she breathed, momentarily forgetting the danger as she observed the creature that few had ever seen and lived to describe. A distressed call snapped her attention back to her companions. Kale's voice, faint but urgent, echoed through the darkness. "Orion's in trouble! Can't maintain altitude!" Lyra banked sharply, releasing a continuous stream of markers as she descended toward the source of the cry. She found Kale, circling helplessly, his glider intact, but Orion nowhere in sight. "Downdraft took him," Kale explained. "Tried to follow, but nearly got pulled in myself." Without hesitation, Lyra tucked her wings and dove into the powerful downdraft, her father's glider responding perfectly to her commands despite the extreme conditions. The darkness intensified as she plummeted, the pressure building in her ears. Then, a flash of movement, Orion's glider spinning out of control. One wing partially collapsed from the strain. Lyra maneuvered alongside, shouting instructions that were swept away by the howling wind. Understanding she couldn't be heard, she gestured urgently, demonstrating the necessary adjustments to compensate for the damaged wing. Orion, veteran Skywalker that he was, comprehended and implemented her suggestions, gradually bringing his craft under marginal control. Together, they fought their way back up the air current, inch by agonizing inch, until they broke free into slightly calmer turbulence where Kale waited anxiously. I thought I'd lost you both, he admitted, relief evident despite the darkness that concealed his features. The old man still remembers how to fly, Orion replied, his voice strained but carrying a hint of his former confidence. They continued through the charcoal clouds with renewed caution, navigating by the subtle cues that only trained skywalkers could detect. Eventually, the perpetual darkness began to thin, giving way to a gradual lightening that heralded their approach to the region's boundary. When they finally emerged into clear air, the contrast was so stark that they squinted against the sudden brightness. Cirrus Haven floated before them, its distinctive spiral structures gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Unlike Windrift's rustic design, Cirrus Haven embraced a more elegant aesthetic, with buildings that seemed to flow from the very clouds upon which they rested. At the center rose the observatory, a crystalline dome that captured and analyzed the changing patterns of Arian's atmosphere. They landed on a public platform, their arrival drawing curious stares from locals unaccustomed to seeing traditional gliders among the more modern vessels that typically visited their city. "We need to find Mira quickly," Orion said, wincing as he disentangled himself from his damaged glider. "The guild won't be far behind." "I know where the observatory is," Kale offered, assuming the lead as they made their way through Cirrus Haven's winding pathways. The observatory's entrance featured an elaborate mechanism that analyzed atmospheric composition before allowing visitors to enter. As the doors slid open, they revealed a vast circular chamber dominated by a three-dimensional projection of Arian sky layers. Scientists moved efficiently around the display, making adjustments as new data flowed in from monitoring stations scattered throughout the known territories. At the center of this activity stood a woman with striking silver-streaked hair, her focused expression suggesting deep concentration as she studied a particularly troubling pattern in the projection. "Mira Solis!" Orion called, his voice carrying across the chamber. The woman looked up, surprise registering briefly, before her features settled into cautious neutrality. "Orion Sky," she acknowledged. "I thought you'd retired to obscurity." "Circumstances change," he replied, approaching the projection. "And these circumstances concern all of Arian." Mira's gaze shifted to Lyra and Kale, assessing them with scientific precision. "You've come through the charcoal clouds," she noted, indicating the residue that darkened their clothing and equipment. "A desperate route." "We need your help," Lyra stated simply, producing the map fragment. "And your expertise." Mira's composed demeanor faltered at the sight of the crystalline shard. "Is that—" "Part of the celestial map," Orion confirmed, leading to Cloud Mountain. The meteorologist glanced around the chamber, then gestured toward a private research area. "Not here," she murmured. "Too many ears." Once secured in her laboratory, Mira examined the fragment under specialized equipment, her trained eye identifying patterns invisible to the others. "This is authentic," she confirmed eventually. "And it's radiating a frequency that corresponds to atmospheric stabilization patterns we've been tracking for years." She looked up, eyes bright with scientific excitement. "Cloud Mountain isn't just a legend. It's a weather control mechanism of incredible sophistication." "Can you locate it from this fragment?" Lyra asked. Mira hesitated. "Not exactly, but I can determine where the next fragment might be." She indicated an angular marking on the crystal's edge. "This is a directional indicator, combined with atmospheric density readings. It points to the floating archives in Stratus City." "The archives are under guild control," Kale pointed out, "have been for years. Which explains why they're hunting the map pieces so aggressively." Orion mused. "They must have discovered references to Cloud Mountain's power and want it for themselves." "If Thane Ormus harnesses that power," Lyra said grimly, "he'll control every aspect of Arian's atmosphere. Free flight will become impossible without guild permission." "Worse," Mira added, bringing up a simulation on her laboratory display. "My models indicate the celestial canopy's deterioration is accelerating exponentially." Without intervention from the original stabilizing source, presumably Cloud Mountain, we faced total atmospheric collapse within days. The projection showed the golden canopy disintegrating, followed by catastrophic changes to air pressure and composition. Floating islands plummeted as their levitation crystals failed, and the carefully stratified ecosystem that had sustained life for generations dissolved into chaos. "How soon can you leave?" Lyra asked Mira directly. The meteorologist blinked in surprise. "Leave? You want me to come with you?" "We need your expertise to interpret the map and navigate the changing atmosphere," Orion explained. "This journey may be Arian's last hope." Mira glanced around her laboratory, at the research that had defined her career and the stability she had carefully constructed. Then, she looked again at the simulation of impending doom. "Give me 10 minutes to gather essential equipment," she decided. While Mira prepared, Lyra set about repairing Orion's damaged glider, her skilled hands working quickly to restore structural integrity to the compromised wing. Kale, meanwhile, charted the most inconspicuous route to Stratus City, avoiding known guild patrol patterns. The direct approach would be suicide, he determined, unfurling a detailed aerial map. But there's a maintenance passage through the lower cloud strata, technically off-limits, but used by smugglers and independent traders. "Navigation will be challenging," Orion warned. "The lower strata have become increasingly toxic as guild industrial outputs contaminate the air." "I've designed filtration masks," Mira announced, returning with a pack of equipment and 4 devices that resembled reinforced breathing apparatus. "These should protect us from the worst effects, though I wouldn't recommend extended exposure." They departed Cirrus Haven under cover of dusk, when the fading light provided natural camouflage for their escape. The journey to the lower strata required a controlled descent through progressively denser cloud layers, each presenting unique challenges to navigation. As they penetrated the lowest viable layer, the quality of the air degraded noticeably. Even through the filtration masks, a bitter taste permeated each breath, and visibility reduced to murky outlines. Industrial waste from guild factories had transformed this once pristine region into a toxic soup that swirled with unnatural colors. "Keep formation," Lyra called, releasing marker liquid that now served the dual purpose of navigation guide and air quality indicator. The luminescent droplets reacted with pollutants, changing color to signal particularly dangerous concentrations. They progressed slowly, forced to navigate around pockets of caustic vapor that could corrode glider surfaces on contact. Occasionally, the silhouette of a massive filtration unit loomed through the haze, guild technology that extracted valuable components from the pollution while doing little to actually clean the atmosphere. "They're mining their own waste," Mira observed bitterly, creating a profitable cycle of destruction and selective remediation. A sudden shift in air pressure warned of approaching vessels. The group took shelter in the shadow of an abandoned processing platform, its structure half dissolved by the very chemicals it had once helped produce. A guild patrol passed overhead, their engines pushing away the toxic mist temporarily. Through this momentary clearing, Lyra glimpsed a shocking sight: a massive construction project extending across the horizon. Enormous mechanical pillars rose from the depths, supporting what appeared to be the framework for an artificial sky layer. "What are they building?" she whispered, though the patrol was now too distant to hear. "The new canopy," Mira replied, her scientific detachment failing to mask her horror. Thane Ormus announced the concept last year, a technological replacement for the failing celestial canopy. Most dismissed it as impossible propaganda. "It would place all of Arian under guild control," Orion realized, every breath dependent on their machinery. "And those who couldn't pay?" Kyle asked. No one answered. The implications hung in the poisoned air, more toxic than any chemical. They continued their journey through the lower strata, each passing hour bringing new evidence of the guild's expanding influence and the natural world's corresponding decline. Where once diverse sky fauna had thrived, now only the most resilient species remained, mutated creatures adapted to survive in the changing atmosphere. By dawn, they approached the vertical shafts that would allow them to ascend to Stratus City's level. Unlike the other floating communities they had visited, Stratus City was fully integrated with Guild technology, a showcase of Thane Ormus's vision for Arian's future. "We'll need to separate here," Kale suggested, as they prepared for the ascent. "4 gliders arriving together will attract attention." "Agreed," Lyra nodded. "Mira and I will head for the archives directly. You and Orion create a diversion near the commercial district." The plan set. They ascended through maintenance shafts rarely used by official traffic, emerging into Stratus City's airspace. They were immediately struck by the contrast with the polluted lower levels. Here, the air was artificially pristine, processed to perfection by Guild technology that hummed from discrete units positioned throughout the urban landscape. The city itself was a marvel of engineering. Buildings of gleaming metal and glass, connected by enclosed walkways that eliminated the need for personal flight. Citizens moved about in Guild-manufactured transport pods or along automated conveyor systems that carried them effortlessly between destinations. "They've eliminated the need for skywalkers entirely," Orion observed sadly as they landed on a maintenance platform designed for service vehicles. "No one flies themselves anymore." "That's the point," Lyra replied. "Dependence breeds control." They concealed their gliders beneath maintenance tarps and split into their assigned teams. Kyle and Orion headed toward the commercial district, while Lyra and Mira made their way to the archives, a towering structure of reinforced glass that housed Arian's collective knowledge. "Access is restricted," Mira noted as they observed the archive entrance, where citizens presented identification for scanning before entering. "And I'm certainly registered in their system as an observatory scientist." "We don't need the main entrance," Lyra assured her, pointing to a maintenance hatch visible on the building's western face. "Standard Guild architecture includes service access points for exterior repairs." Using maintenance uniforms, borrowed from a supply closet, they accessed the service hatch without challenge. Inside, the archives revealed their true vastness, floor after floor of knowledge storage, from ancient manuscripts to the latest digital repositories. The fragment indicated the second map piece would be in the historical atmospheric phenomena section, Mira whispered, as they navigated the service corridors that ran behind the main halls. They located the relevant section on the 17th floor, a quiet area with few visitors. Ancient texts and artifacts related to Arian's atmospheric history filled the carefully controlled preservation chambers. There, Mira indicated a sealed display case containing what appeared to be a meteorite fragment. "The energy signature matches our piece." As they approached the case, a familiar voice froze them in place. "I knew you'd lead us to it eventually." Thane Ormus emerged from between the towering shelves, flanked by Guild security personnel. "Though I expected Orion to be with you, not creating a rather obvious diversion in the market square." Tall and imposing, with silver-threaded black hair and calculating eyes, Ormus projected the confident authority that had elevated him to Guild leadership. His tailored uniform bore the organization's emblem prominently, and at his belt hung a compact device that Lyra recognized as a personal atmospheric manipulator, technology that allowed him to control the air in his immediate vicinity. "The celestial canopy is collapsing," Lyra stated flatly. "Cloud Mountain is the only hope of restoring balance." "Cloud Mountain is the future of the Guild," Ormus corrected smoothly. "Its power will ensure our new canopy functions perfectly, bringing order to the chaos of natural atmospheric conditions." "At the cost of freedom," Lyra countered. Ormus shrugged elegantly. "Freedom is inefficient. The Skywalkers had their era, an era of unpredictability, danger, and wasted potential. The Guild brings certainty." "And charges for the privilege," Mira added bitterly. "Resources must be allocated rationally," Ormus replied. "Now, The map fragments, if you please. We already have the third piece secured. Yours will complete the set. Lyra tensed, calculating the odds of escape. The security personnel were armed with stun batons and positioned to block all obvious exits. A sudden explosion rocked the building, sending tremors through the floor beneath them. Alarm systems activated, their shrill warnings drowning out Ormus's startled exclamation. Kale's voice came through a small communicator hidden in Lyra's collar. "Hope that was distracting enough. East exit clear for 30 seconds. Lyra seized the opportunity, grabbing a nearby preservation case and hurling it at the security personnel. As they scattered to avoid the priceless artifacts, she smashed the display containing the map fragment and seized the crystalline shard. "Run!" she shouted to Mira, already sprinting toward the eastern exit. They fled through the confusion of evacuation procedures. Guild personnel, too, focused on the explosion to notice two maintenance workers among the many escaping the building. Outside, they reunited with Kale and Orion at the designated meeting point. "That was more explosive than planned," Lyra commented as they reclaimed their hidden gliders. Kale grinned sheepishly. "Turns out their weather control substations are more volatile than advertised. All I did was adjust a few settings." "We have the second fragment," Mira announced, examining the newly acquired piece alongside the original. They fit together perfectly. When joined, the two shards revealed more of the celestial map's design, a complex navigational chart that depicted air currents and celestial alignments unlike any modern mapping system. "Ormus said they already have the third piece," Lyra remembered. "We need to find the fourth before they do." Orion studied the assembled fragments, his experienced eye recognizing patterns that escaped the others. "This indicates the fourth piece is at the Nimbus ruins," he said eventually. "The abandoned temple complex near the Eastern Divide." "The Divide is dangerous territory," Kyle warned. "Atmospheric instability has rendered it nearly impassable. That's why the ancient settlement was abandoned." "It's also why the Guild wouldn't have searched there yet," Lyra pointed out. "They rely too heavily on their technology, which fails in the Divide's electromagnetic disturbances." "Traditional navigation would still work," Orion mused. "Skywalker techniques." "Then that's where we're going," Lyra decided. They departed Stratus City, amid growing chaos. The Guild forces distracted by the mysterious explosion that had damaged one of their primary weather control substations. By the time organized pursuit began, the four companions had disappeared into the cloud layers, bound for the treacherous Eastern Divide. The journey required 2 days of careful navigation through increasingly unstable air masses. The celestial canopy's deterioration accelerated visibly during their flight, with larger gaps appearing in the golden barrier that had protected Arian for generations. "The atmospheric composition is changing rapidly," Mira reported, consulting portable instruments she had brought from the observatory. "Oxygen levels are fluctuating, and the barometric stability that keeps our islands afloat is deteriorating." "How long?" Lyra asked simply. "At current rates, 36 hours before catastrophic failure begins." The Eastern Divide appeared on the horizon like a wound in the sky, a churning maelstrom of cloud formations that collided and repelled in unnatural patterns. Lightning flashed continuously within the turbulent mass, and the air itself seemed to distort, creating visual mirages that disoriented even experienced navigators. "The Nimbus ruins should be at the center," Orion said, his voice betraying apprehension at the prospect of entering such chaos. "Standard gliders won't survive those conditions," Kyle observed, eyeing the violent air currents with professional assessment. "We'll need to modify them," Lyra decided, directing the group to land on a small, uninhabited sky island that floated at the Divide's periphery. Working through the night, Lyra adapted their gliders for the extreme conditions ahead. She reinforced wing structures with flexible support rods, adjusted control surfaces for greater responsiveness, and applied a conductive coating to dissipate electrical charges from the lightning they would inevitably encounter. "These modifications will help," she explained, as dawn approached. But ultimately, survival depends on the pilot. We'll need to fly by instinct, not instrumentation. The divide disrupts all conventional navigation systems. Like true skywalkers, Orion nodded, a hint of pride cutting through his weariness. They launched into the heart of the divide as the first light illuminated its swirling chaos. Immediately, the violent air currents seized their gliders, threatening to tear the crafts apart despite Lyra's modifications. Each pilot fought for control, implementing the techniques she had hastily taught them during the night's preparations. Communication became impossible as the roaring winds and crackling energy drowned out all sound. They relied instead on visual signals and the luminescent markers that Lyra periodically released to indicate course corrections. Halfway to their destination, a massive electrical discharge engulfed Kale's glider. For a terrifying moment, his craft glowed with blue-white energy before the conductive coating channeled the charge away from vital components. He emerged shaken, but intact, offering a thumbs-up to signal his continued ability to proceed. The Nimbus ruins materialized suddenly through a momentary clearing in the turbulence. Ancient structures of weathered stone perched upon a floating island that shifted erratically with the divide's chaotic forces. Unlike other sky islands that maintained relatively stable positions, this one seemed to dance to the rhythm of the surrounding storm, making approach extremely hazardous. Lyra signaled for a spiraling descent pattern that would compensate for the island's movements. One by one, they landed on the ruin's central plaza, securing their gliders to stone anchors that had clearly served the same purpose for ancient visitors. The ruins themselves were a testament to Arian's early civilization, a people who had worshipped the sky in all its manifestations. Weathered statues depicted figures with outstretched wings, their faces turned eternally skyward in adoration. Temples built to channel specific air currents created haunting melodies as the wind passed through carefully designed apertures. The Nimbus civilization believed Cloud Mountain was the dwelling place of weather deities, Orion explained, as they moved deeper into the complex. Their priests made pilgrimages there to commune with these powers and ensure favorable atmospheric conditions. So, Cloud Mountain isn't just a natural formation, Mira realized. It's an engineered structure, perhaps the ultimate weather control system. One that worked in harmony with nature rather than subjugating it, Lyra added, her fingers tracing inscriptions on a temple wall. Unlike the guild's approach, they found the map fragment in the ruins' innermost sanctuary, a chamber designed to align with specific celestial events. The crystalline shard was embedded in the central altar, pulsing with gentle energy that intensified as they brought the other fragments near. 4 pieces, Kale counted, as Lyra carefully extracted the shard. But Ormus said they only had the 3rd. Where's the 5th? Orion's expression grew troubled. There is no 5th piece. The celestial map has only 4 components. Then Ormus was bluffing, Lyra concluded. They don't have the 3rd fragment. Or they found it after we escaped, Mira suggested grimly. The 4 fragments, when joined, formed a nearly complete map of Arian's upper atmosphere, with a specific pathway, marked through currents and celestial landmarks that few modern navigators would recognize. At the pathway's end, Cloud Mountain was depicted not as a peak, but as a massive floating crystal structure, a naturally occurring atmospheric processor of incredible sophistication. We can reach it, Lyra determined, after studying the map carefully. But we'll need to pass through the celestial canopy itself. No craft has ever penetrated the canopy and returned, Orion reminded them. The energy discharge would destroy conventional gliders instantly. My father designed his glider specifically for that purpose, Lyra revealed. The materials, the configuration, all intended for canopy penetration. One glider won't save Arian, Kale pointed out. It will if it activates Cloud Mountain, Mira countered, her scientific mind already calculating possibilities. The map suggests the mountain is dormant, not destroyed. Reactivation could restore atmospheric balance immediately. A violent tremor shook the ruins, more powerful than the usual fluctuations of the Eastern Divide. Lyra rushed to the sanctuary's entrance, gazing skyward with growing alarm. The celestial canopy was failing before their eyes. Massive sections dissolved into nothingness, allowing unfiltered external atmosphere to rush into Arian's carefully balanced ecosystem. In the distance, a floating island destabilized as its levitation crystals failed, tilting precariously before beginning a slow, inexorable descent toward the unseen surface far below. "We're out of time," Lyra stated, returning to the group. "I need to leave for Cloud Mountain immediately." "We'll come with you," Kyle insisted. Lyra shook her head. "Only my father's glider can make the journey, and someone needs to warn as many settlements as possible to activate their emergency stabilization systems. It won't prevent collapse, but it might buy time for evacuation to the largest islands, which will fall more slowly." Arguments ensued, but the logic was undeniable. Eventually, they agreed to separate. Orion, Mira, and Kale would spread the warning while Lyra attempted the seemingly impossible journey to Cloud Mountain. Before departing, Orion approached Lyra privately, his weathered face solemn. "There's something you should know," he said quietly, "about your father, and why I retired from the Skywalkers." "Now isn't the time," Lyra began, but Orion raised a hand to stop her. "It is precisely the time. Ren and I found the third fragment years ago, during our final expedition together. We attempted to reach Cloud Mountain, but I lost my nerve when we approached the canopy. Your father continued alone while I turned back." Understanding dawned on Lyra's face. "He made it through." Orion nodded sadly. "I believe so, but I never heard from him again, and the atmospheric deterioration continued unabated. Whatever he found at Cloud Mountain, he was unable to activate it fully. Or was prevented from doing so," Lyra suggested, the pieces falling into place. "The Guild has the third fragment because they recovered it from my father." "It's possible," Orion admitted, "which means Thane Ormus may already be attempting to reach Cloud Mountain himself, to harness its power for the Guild's new canopy." With renewed urgency, they completed preparations for their separate missions. As the others departed to spread warnings throughout Arian's inhabited regions, Lyra launched her father's glider toward the disintegrating celestial canopy, the complete map secured safely in her navigation pouch. The journey to the canopy's nearest accessible point required all her skill as atmospheric conditions deteriorated around her. Islands that had floated serenely for generations now bobbed erratically as their levitation systems struggled against fluctuating air pressure. Guild vessels scrambled to establish control, their mechanical solutions proving inadequate against the scale of natural collapse. As she approached the canopy, Lyra spotted an ominous sight, a Guild flagship forcing its way through the golden barrier. Its reinforced hull, surrounded by an energy field that barely protected it from the discharge. Smaller vessels fell away, destroyed by the attempt, but the flagship pressed on, creating a temporary breach. "Ormus," Lyra muttered, recognizing the Guild leader's personal vessel. "He's going for Cloud Mountain." The flagship disappeared through the breach, which sealed behind it as the canopy's natural resistance reasserted itself. Lyra would need to create her own passage, one suited to her father's specially designed glider, rather than the brute force approach of Guild technology. She activated the glider's unique features, crystalline filaments embedded in the wing surfaces that began to resonate with the canopy's frequency. As she approached the golden barrier, these filaments glowed with increasing intensity, establishing a harmonic relationship with the energy field rather than opposing it directly. The moment of penetration came with a flash of blinding light and a sensation of passing through liquid fire. For several terrifying seconds, Lyra lost all sense of direction as her glider tumbled through the barrier. Then, abruptly, she emerged into a realm few living beings had ever witnessed, the space beyond Arian's protective canopy. Here, The air was thin, but breathable, and an eerie silence replaced the constant winds of the world below. Floating serenely in this rarefied atmosphere was Cloud Mountain, not a traditional peak, but a colossal crystalline structure that pulsed with internal energy. Its faceted surfaces reflected light in hypnotic patterns, creating an aurora-like display that surrounded the entire formation. Approaching the structure, Lyra saw the guild flagship had already docked at a naturally formed platform that extended from one facet. Armed personnel established a perimeter as Thane Ormus himself entered the crystal mountain through an aperture that seemed to open at his approach. Lyra circled to the opposite side, searching for another entrance. The map indicated multiple access points, aligned with specific atmospheric currents that flowed around the structure. Finding one such current, she allowed it to guide her glider to a smaller opening, partially concealed by crystalline outgrowths. Inside, Cloud Mountain revealed its true nature, a vast atmospheric processor created by some ancient civilization with technology far beyond modern understanding. Crystal chambers connected by flowing air currents formed a complex system that generated and regulated the weather patterns of Arian below. At the mountain's heart, Lyra found a central control chamber where all air currents converged. There, Thane Ormus stood before a crystalline console, the third map fragment already positioned in a receptacle clearly designed for the complete set. "You're too late, Skywalker," he called without turning, somehow sensing her arrival. "Cloud Mountain's power will soon serve the Guild exclusively." "You don't understand what you're doing," Lyra responded, moving cautiously into the chamber. "This system wasn't designed to be controlled. It's meant to maintain natural balance." Ormus turned, his expression surprisingly weary beneath the confident exterior. "Balance is a luxury we can no longer afford. The celestial canopy is failing because this ancient technology is obsolete. The Guild's new canopy will replace it, a controlled, manageable system. That will make every citizen dependent on Guild technology to breathe," Lyra pointed out. "Those who can't pay will suffocate." "Sacrifices are necessary for progress," Ormus replied dismissively. "Now, hand over the remaining fragments. The activation sequence requires the complete map. My father refused you years ago. What makes you think I'll cooperate now?" A flash of surprise crossed Ormus's face. "So Orion finally told you?" "Yes. Renvelt reached Cloud Mountain before us, but foolishly refused to harness its power properly. He activated only the basic maintenance functions, enough to slow the canopy's deterioration, but not enough to prevent eventual collapse. Because he understood the consequences of tampering with natural systems," Lyra guessed. "He understood nothing," Ormus snapped, his composure cracking. "He died defending this obsolete technology, taking the fourth fragment with him. We've spent years searching for it." "And now you need my fragments to complete your plan," Lyra concluded. "That won't happen." "Your cooperation is preferred, but not required," Ormus gestured, and Guild security personnel emerged from adjacent passages, weapons trained on Lyra. Before they could advance, a tremendous shudder ran through Cloud Mountain. The crystalline structure groaned as external forces stressed its integrity. Through an observation portal, Lyra witnessed the celestial canopy beginning to collapse entirely, massive sections dissolving into nothingness. "It's happening faster than predicted," Ormus muttered, genuine concern breaking through his confident facade. "We need to activate the new canopy immediately, with or without optimal control." He turned back to the console, entering a sequence that caused the third fragment to pulse with energy. The mountain responded with increasing vibrations, its systems activating partially, but fluctuating erratically without the complete map. "You'll destroy everything!" Lyra shouted over the growing disturbance. "Cloud Mountain can't interface with your artificial systems." Another violent tremor knocked several Guild personnel off their feet. Warning lights activated throughout the chamber as the mountain's automated systems detected dangerous instability. Ormus hesitated, clearly torn between proceeding with his plan and acknowledging its potential catastrophic failure. In that moment of indecision, Lyra saw her opportunity. She launched herself toward the console, evading security personnel slowed by the continuing tremors. Reaching the crystalline controls, she extracted the third fragment and swiftly combined it with her own pieces, completing the celestial map for the first time in generations. "No!" Ormus lunged forward, but another violent shake sent him stumbling. Lyra placed the completed map into the central receptacle, where it locked into position with a resonant chime that somehow cut through the chaos. Instantly, the tremors ceased as Cloud Mountain's systems recognized the authentic control key. The chamber illuminated with patterns of light that corresponded to Arian's atmospheric layers. Lyra could see the celestial canopy's deterioration represented in real time, alongside the artificial structures of the Guild's new canopy project. The system is offering a choice, she realized, studying the patterns. Restore the natural balance or transition to artificial control. Choose progress, Ormus urged, regaining his footing. The old ways are dying, Skywalker. Your father couldn't accept that reality, but you still can. Lyra considered the options before her, understanding the full implications of each. The Guild's new canopy would indeed provide stability, but at the cost of freedom, natural diversity, and self-determination for Arian's inhabitants. Restoring the natural balance would preserve these values, but require significant changes to industrial practices that had damaged the atmosphere. I choose balance, she decided firmly, activating the restoration sequence. Not the past, but a sustainable future. The mountain responded immediately, its crystal facets glowing with renewed energy that flowed outward in pulsating waves. Through the observation portal, Lyra watched as this energy reached the failing celestial canopy, reinforcing its structure and closing the dangerous gaps that had formed. You've doomed us to obsolescence, Ormus declared bitterly as his security forces retreated toward the flagship, recognizing their defeat. The Guild offered certainty. At too high a price, Lyra countered. Arian needs both tradition and innovation, working in harmony rather than opposition. Your new canopy would have replaced nature with machinery. Nature is inefficient, Ormus insisted, backing toward the exit. Nature is resilient, Lyra corrected. And now, so is Arian again. As Ormus and his forces departed in the Guild flagship, Cloud Mountain continued its restoration process, sending pulses of energy throughout Arian's atmosphere. The celestial canopy stabilized, regaining its golden luminescence, while the natural air currents that maintained the floating island's positions strengthened and regularized. Lyra remained at the control console, monitoring the progress and learning the mountain's ancient systems. Hours passed as the restoration gained momentum, spreading from the canopy to the lower atmospheric layers. Eventually, a familiar glider appeared at the mountain's entrance, Orion's craft, followed closely by those of Kale and Mira. You did it, Orion exclaimed as they joined her in the central chamber. The atmospheric readings are stabilizing across all of Arian. Cloud Mountain is fully operational again, Mira confirmed, her scientific instruments registering the changes. And it's dismantling the Guild's artificial structures in the process. Ormus, Kale inquired. Gone, for now, Lyra answered. But the Guild won't abandon their ambitions so easily. No, Orion agreed, but they've lost their advantage. With Cloud Mountain active again, the balance of power has shifted. Together, they explored the ancient facility, discovering technologies and knowledge that had been lost for generations. Mira was particularly fascinated by the atmospheric monitoring systems that tracked conditions across all of Arian with incredible precision. The mountain doesn't just maintain the celestial canopy, she explained after studying the systems. It regulates all aspects of our atmosphere, from wind patterns to precipitation cycles. It's the heart of Arian's ecosystem. And now it's functioning as intended again, Lyra noted with satisfaction. As days passed, reports arrived from across Arian of recovering atmospheric conditions. The Guild's influence waned as their weather control technology proved unnecessary in the face of Cloud Mountain's more efficient natural processes. Many Guild scientists and engineers, recognizing the superiority of the ancient system, defected to join the growing coalition centered around Lyra and her companions. 1 month after the activation of Cloud Mountain, Lyra stood on Windrift's edge once more, watching gliders soar through skies clearer than any in recent memory. The village had been rebuilt following the Guild's attack, with improvements that incorporated sustainable technologies inspired by Cloud Mountain's designs. "They're calling you the Skykeeper now," Kale commented, joining her at the outlook point. "Leader of the new Skywalker Guild." Lyra smiled at the title. "I prefer to think of us as guardians rather than controllers. Cloud Mountain taught us that much." Speaking of teaching, Kale gestured toward the training field, where Orion instructed a group of young aspirants in the basics of traditional glider flight. "The old man seems rejuvenated." "He's found purpose again," Lyra observed. "We all have." Mira approached with her latest atmospheric report. "The celestial canopy has fully stabilized," she announced, "and the toxic accumulation in the lower strata is dissipating as Cloud Mountain's purification systems process the pollutants." "And the Tech Guild?" Lyra inquired. "Restructuring," Mira replied with satisfaction. "Many members have embraced the integration of traditional methods with appropriate technology. Those who remain loyal to Ormus's vision are increasingly isolated." Lyra nodded, her gaze drawn to a distant speck ascending through the cloud layers, a solitary glider performing maneuvers that few modern pilots could achieve. The craft danced with the air currents rather than fighting them, embodying the Skywalker philosophy that had nearly been lost. "My father would be proud," she said softly. "Not just of me, but of what Arian is becoming." As the sun set behind the floating meadows, painting the clouds in shades of amber and gold, Lyra prepared her glider for an evening flight. The celestial canopy glowed with renewed vitality above, while below, the stratified world of Arian pulsed with the rhythm of harmonious existence. She launched into the twilight air, her glider catching an updraft that carried her effortlessly skyward. Other craft joined her: Orion, Kale, Mira, and dozens of new Skywalkers, their wings silhouetted against the fading light. Together, they soared through the purified skies of Arian, guardians of a world balanced between tradition and progress, nature and innovation, the wisdom of the past and the promise of the future. And high above, Cloud Mountain shimmered like a sentinel, its crystalline facets reflecting the light of stars, just beginning to emerge in the darkening sky, a beacon of hope for generations to come.